Hey, what's up guys? In this video we will talk about the video that you just saw. And this was shot 100% on my iPhone 11 Pro, and you can produce similar results. I'm sure you've seen a lot of those videos because they are just super trendy at the moment. And to be honest, before shooting this video I was a little nervous to shoot a sequence like this with my phone. I've shot a few B-roll sequences with my proper camera, but never with my phone. And I was a little skeptical whether the results would be appealing. But man, after I shot the video, my concerns were absolutely blown away. Shooting this video showed me, once again, that you can basically shoot almost every video scenario with your phone. And technology and the quality is getting better and better. But now let's start with my tips for shooting those sequences. The first tip I have for you is to plan ahead, and this is a very important one. Generally speaking, I would recommend to plan those videos as detailed as you can. The better you plan your videos, especially the camera movements and the transitions, the easier time you will have when you're actually shooting the sequence, and also especially when you are editing your video. For the sequence that you just saw, I have to admit that I did not have a shot list or anything at all. Shooting this sequence was a super spontaneous idea. We just drove to the supermarket, bought a few ingredients and made this video. But this is definitely not what I would recommend that you should do, because as I've said before, I would recommend that you should plan those videos as good and as detailed as you can. But I know planning a video like this can be a little difficult at the beginning, to just sit down with a pen and a piece of paper and write down an entire sequence. And what I like to do and what I would recommend that you should do is that you should browse through YouTube or Instagram and find some inspiration, and then combine a few ideas together and interpret it in your own way, so make it your own. And the second tip I have for you is to shoot at high frame rates. About 90% of all shots in this sequence were shot at 120 frames per second. There was a shot here and there where I switched to 60 frames per second to get the better and higher 4K resolution, but generally speaking I would recommend that you should shoot around 100 to 100 frames per second. This gives you the ability to slow your footage down 4 to 5 times in the post-production, which opens up a ton of possibilities. If you watch the video once again, you can see that I used a ton of speed ramps. I used these to spice up my edit and to make the scene look more interesting for the viewer. So the 100 or 120 frame per second shots look very cool, but a 2-second shot slowed down 4 times makes your clip now 8 seconds long. So keeping the entire clip that slow will get boring very quickly. And the third tip I have for you is to create depth in your scene with lighting. When you are shooting with a camera that has a big sensor like a Super 35 or even a full frame sensor, you can create some shallow depth of field. However, when you are shooting with a smartphone, this is not that easily possible. You can of course create some depth, but you have to be very close to your subject. So what I did was to just darken the entire background as good as I could and light the table as bright and even as I could. And this then gave me the possibility to turn up the contrast in the editing room and to create this very nice looking image. And this will take some practice, but I have separate videos about lighting in the course. Talking about lighting brings me to my next tip. Use a ton of lights. When you are shooting at those higher frame rates and creating depth with your light, you need to have some very strong ones. A rule of thumb in filmmaking is to always shoot at twice your frame rate, because this will give you the most natural looking motion blur. But that also means that if you shoot at 120 frames per second, you need to have a shutter speed of 1/240th of a second. And in easy words, this means that your sensor gets exposed with a lot less light. And don't worry if this all sounds a little complicated right now. I cover all those technical aspects in detail in the course, and there is a separate video about frame rates as well as exposure. And the next tip is to practice your camera movements. You can shoot those sequences with a gimbal, which will definitely smooth out your movements, but the gimbal will also limit you in certain scenarios. At the beginning I was planning to shoot with a gimbal, but I quickly realized that I could not get the shots that I wanted, or I could not get it how I wanted them. So I switched to handheld, and this worked out perfectly for the shots that I wanted. And since most phones these days have some very good image stabilization, and since I shot the clips at high frame rates and slowed them down in the post-production, I got some really smooth looking shots. But as I've said before, you definitely need to practice your camera movements. The smoother your movements are, the better the results will be. And the next tip I have for you is to be patient and to be willing to do retakes if it didn't work out as planned. There were some shots that we took about 7 to 8 times until I finally got it the way I wanted. And I also recommend to practice your shots with your talent before you start shooting. And the last tip I have for you is to learn to edit those sequences. You can really make or break those sequences in the editing room. In my sequence there were a few shots that didn't quite work out as I wanted them to be, but by tweaking them a little in the post-production I got them almost to the point where I wanted them to be. But this would be just too much to cover for this video, then this video would be like 1 hour long. But in the course I have an entire editing breakdown where I talk about each individual clip and how I manipulated it, as well as a complete video about the sound effects, music and color correction. In the course you can also download my Premiere Pro file as well as all the raw files to try it out yourself. So maybe you can edit them together even better than I did. We will launch our course in early September, and if you haven't seen it yet, we are giving away 3 gimbals during launch week. And all you have to do is to comment the post with the 3 gimbals, tag 2 of your friends and sign up on our pre-launch list. That's basically it. The winners will be released during our launch week. But that's basically it for this video. If you guys have any further questions, please let me know.